Hello everyone, you are on the Retelling Films channel, and this is a short retelling of the movie Miracle on the Hudson. Imagine this picture. You are at the helm of a falling airliner. You have 155 passengers on board, and you have only 208 seconds to make an informed decision and land the plane. The movie, which is based on real events, begins on board an A320 airliner. The captain of the plane, Chesley Sullenberger, nicknamed Sully, reports to the controllers that two engines have failed due to a collision with a flock of birds, and then leads the plane to land between two city skyscrapers. But there is not enough altitude, and the plane hits a building with its wing and crashes into another, exploding on impact. But it turns out to be an experienced pilot's nightmare. After recovering from his nightmare, Sully goes for a morning run where he is almost hit by a car. Immersed in his own thoughts, he takes a bath in his hotel room. While getting ready in the morning, he listens to a report about the miraculous rescue of Flight 1549, in which grateful passengers thank the pilots. Dissatisfied with the program, Sully turns off the TV and heads to a meeting of the National Transportation Security Council. The meeting is due to an incident that occurred on the Hudson River. Sully and his partner, co-pilot Jeff Scales, are suspected of unprofessional behaviour that endangered the health and lives of all passengers on the airliner. In an emergency situation, Sully made a decision to land the plane on the Hudson River, emphasising this. The commission members are interested in why he did not return to the airport from which he took off. According to Sully, there was simply no time for a manoeuvre, so he made the decision based on his 42 years of piloting experience. But his professional fitness is being questioned. He is being asked how much sleep he has had, whether he has been drinking alcohol or taking drugs, what his blood sugar was. The meeting ends with a decision to conduct a computer simulation with a similar emergency situation. Two engines failing due to a collision with a flock of birds. The task of the simulation is to show the most optimal scenario. Although this is a mere formality for the company, Sully and Skiles are not very happy with the doubts cast at them. They are somewhat reassured by the fact that the limo driver considers them heroes because of what they did. Sully calls his wife Lorraine from the car, and journalists are standing guard not only outside the hotel, but also outside their house. They all want to join the sensation and find out the details, but the tired pilots are not in the mood for that. Continuing the conversation from the hotel room, Sally warns her wife that he will not be here for long due to the investigation. Meanwhile, the journalists, having learned about the preliminary results of the investigation, are ready to debunk him from a hero to a potential murderer for his decision not to pull the plane to the airfield but to land it on the river. But this report turns out to be just the protagonist's nightmare. Unable to sleep after this, Sally calls Jeff and the two of them go for a walk in the night city. During the walk, Sally learns that they will go to a show with David Letterman, the host of a popular talk show. His partner wants to cheer him up, but the pilot is still plagued by doubts that his perfect record will be tarnished by the emergency and the wrong conclusions of the commission. Later, during the interview, Sally does not respond to the journalist's attempts to provoke him to discuss the potential danger of an emergency landing on water, and also doesn't consider himself a hero. Talking about his 42 years of flying experience, Sally plunges into memories of how he learned to pilot as a young man. After the shoot, despite the gratitude from the dressing room, he is plagued by doubts. Looking out the window, he imagines what could have happened if he had made the wrong decision. The plane would have crashed in the middle of a city of millions. The thought of what could have happened overwhelms him, so he doesn't hear the airline representative, Mike Cleary, who has come to tell him the bad news. Mike tells Sally that according to the first results, the mechanics believed that the left engine was running at low speed, which casts doubt on Sally's entire story. At the meeting, Jeff says that if Sally had acted exactly as instructed, it would not have landed, but crashed. He cites the example that Sally, as an experienced pilot with good skills, immediately proceeded to the necessary actions, rather than following the instructions point by point. Sally joins him and says that he knows better than any theorist how the A320 behaves in the air. But the commission members do not think so. They think that the left engine was still working, and the speed and altitude gained were sufficient to reach the airport runway. This is confirmed by 20 successful computer simulations. Sally wants to know the exact parameters on which the simulations were run, and the meeting ends before he receives the transcripts of the pilot's conversations with the controllers. The crew of Flight 1549 makes a full appearance on the evening talk show Letterman, where the pilots are reluctant to laugh at the host's jokes. After filming, a tired Sally calls his wife. The wife is upset because she receives notices of unpaid bills from the bank, and the husband is worried that if the commission proves him wrong in an emergency, he will lose his job and even more so his future pension. The story moves back in time to the same day. Sally buys a sandwich in the airport store before the flight, and its passengers buy souvenirs. 3 men from the cancelled flight make it to the plane just before departure. The airplane is preparing for the route, and the last passengers in the cabin are putting their things away, preparing for the trip. In the cockpit, the pilots are checking instruments and discussing plans for the evening and the weather at the destination. Jeff praises the captain's part-time job as a flight safety expert, despite the information about a large staff of specialists. He works alone. While the flight attendants read the mandatory instructions, the controller gives the go-ahead for takeoff. Arriving at the beginning of the runway, Sally reports that he is ready to fly. The power lever goes up and the airliner starts to pick up speed, and after a while the plane takes off. But just as it was starting to climb, a flock of birds flew towards the airliner. Several birds hit the turbines, causing them to lose power. The captain tries to restart the turbines, but it is to no avail. Only the lights blink and panic the passengers. The stewardesses insistently remind passengers to fasten their seatbelts. Sally sends an emergency signal to the dispatcher, saying that he has encountered a flock of birds. The control room offers to return to the airfield, postponing all flights and clearing the runways. But the captain refuses, arguing that they don't have enough altitude to plan there. The dispatcher quickly looks for other options, but Sally has already made a decision. After giving the command to the cabin to prepare for impact, he goes down. The control room sees the plane disappear from the radar over the river. A civilian helicopter spots the plane descending over the Hudson, but the controllers believe to the last that the plane is going to an alternate airfield. Landing on water is deadly. But the captain tries to do it anyway, and that's where the story ends. After saying goodbye to his wife, Sally goes for an evening jog to regain his composure and clear his mind, which is not easy to do as the information about his feat is played on outdoor screens and boards. Looking at the museum exhibits in the distance, the man plunges back into the past to his years in the Air Force. During a training flight in pairs, the Sally fighter began to smoke, which led to a forced landing, thanks to the pilot's skill. The landing was successful, like all the others in his career. The captain enters a pub where the owner recognizes him and treats Sally to a cocktail invented in honor of his famous landing. Despite the fact that the visitors and the owner consider him a hero, he is not entirely sure whether he did the right thing by risking the lives of so many passengers. The events are transported back to that day. Dozens of people look on in awe and amazement as the airliner flies through a city of millions. While the passengers pray in the cabin, the pilot takes the plane to the water. After landing on the water without breaking the plane to pieces, Sally gets up from her seat and runs into the cabin. The river water is already getting inside, so it is necessary to quickly evacuate passengers from the plane. He opens the door, where the emergency ladder inflates at that moment. The stewardesses are trying to control the crowd, preventing panic. They order to open the side doors leading to the wings. Some people try to swim to land, but overestimating their capabilities and the water temperature, they return to the inflatable ladders. Sally continues to lead the evacuation of the passengers, despite the fact that the tail of the plane is already flooding. A ferry is already rushing to the plane, and the captain calls the Coast Guard. The boat cautiously approaches the people, and the crew prepares to provide first aid. At the same time, another ferry arrives at the other wing and begins to evacuate people. Journalists on the shore are calculating how long people can stay in the water at this temperature. Coast Guard officers and divers pull out people who have fallen into the water. Sally checks the plane to make sure no one is left behind, and then, like a real captain, he is the last one to leave the plane. Crouching down on the inflatable ladder, Sally and Jeff unhook the inflatable ladder from the airliner, using it as a boat. The captain is the last one to be lifted onto the ferry, where the sailors have already accommodated all the passengers of the airliner. But Sally is not in the mood for gratitude. He goes up to the second floor of the boat and looks at the crash site. The airliner slowly sinks under the water while the man calls his wife to say that he is okay. Later, everyone is taken to the shore. On the shore, Sally is met by an airline representative, but the captain is more concerned about the well-being of the passengers, whether they all survived, and how badly they were injured. The passengers also call their loved ones, even those who miraculously ended up on the other boat. After that, the upset dispatcher is told the incredible news. The airliner has landed safely. Sally is taken to the hospital and examined by a doctor. His heart rate is elevated, but he manages to calm his nerves a bit after learning the good news. All 155 passengers have been safely rescued. Later, they are checked into a hotel where the manager, overwhelmed with feelings of gratitude, hugs the real hero. The company representative brings clean clothes to the pilots, and Sally wants his uniform cleaned, since he never took off his work clothes after all. The memoir ends with a report that the pilots simply did not have time to make another decision. These words lead him to wonder why the computer simulation shows a successful return to the airport. He calls the company representative to request a simulation with real pilots, suspecting that the results would be different. After a while, a meeting of the Ministry of Transportation and the National Transportation Safety Board begins. At Sally's request, it begins with a simulation with real pilots. The pilots in the simulator successfully land at one airport. The commissioners notice that the result is similar to the computer simulation and turn on a video of another simulator with a landing at a backup airport, which also ends successfully. After that, Sally makes a speech about how the pilots know what awaits them and how they need to act. The human factor was not taken into account at all. They knew about the collision, about the failure of two engines, about the route they needed to take. He and Jeff had none of the above in a critical situation. They relied only on their extensive experience. When Sally asks the Commission how many attempts were made before the pilots successfully completed the task, they get the answer, 17. Immediately afterwards, the committee decides to run the simulation on the simulator with 35 seconds to make a decision in a real situation. With these new simulation parameters, the plane crashes in front of the landing strip, and the approach to the alternate airfield also fails. The Commission members, realizing the groundlessness of the claims, offer to listen to the recording of the negotiations. The audio recording, playing in the headphones, brings the pilots back to that fateful day, experiencing all the stress of a critical situation as a result of a collision with birds. Realizing that the altitude and speed would not be enough to reach a safe runway, the captain makes a difficult and risky decision to land the plane on the Hudson River. Having successfully made the emergency landing, the pilots return to the meeting room. Sally asks for a short break to recover. In the corridor, he praises Jeff for his courage in such a difficult situation. When they return, the meeting continues. The commissioners report that the analysis of the left engine, which was recovered from the bottom, proved that it was destroyed by the collision. There was no thrust. This all proves that no computer simulations are anything without the human factor, the best representatives of which are Captain Chesley Sullenberger and his co-pilot Jeff Skiles. The film ends with a brief note that 155 people from Flight 1549 were rescued in 24 minutes and archival footage of the participants in these real-life events. What do you think of this movie? Please write in the comments. I will be very interested to read your thoughts about this movie. If you liked it, please like and subscribe to my channel. See you soon.